I actually rarely try to convince anyone to invest in Tesla. And many times I've recommended people don't invest in Tesla, and I've said our stock is too high, but then people just ignore me and keep buying the stock for some reason. But I think at a very high level, I'd say that autonomy is an insanely fundamental breakthrough, and no one is even close to Tesla for solving generalized autonomy or generalized self-driving vehicles. No one's even close. With self-driving, as I was talking about earlier, the car becomes, call it roughly 5 times more useful, but it costs the same to build. Now, can you imagine what would happen if a company was we're doing like 25 to 30% gross margins, but suddenly that same thing was 5 times more valuable? What would that do to the value of Tesla and the value of that car? It boggles the mind, actually. So, if you think of net present value of future cash flows, if you actually do the math on that, it's insane. Then there's also the Optimus program, which is our humanoid robot, where we'll leverage our manufacturing expertise and the intelligence we've developed for self-driving to have a useful humanoid robot. Now, the economy is fundamentally GDP per capita times capita. If you no longer have a constraint on capita because of a useful humanoid robot, it is not clear that there's any limit to the size of the economy. And these things will actually happen. So,
okay,
that's probably a good reason.
Welcome to Electrified. It's your host, Dylan Loomis. Quick shout out to my newest patron, Marianne L. Thank you for choosing to support the channel. Real quick shout out to Farzad. I'll be joining him on this Friday trend. So you heard it directly from Elon. He doesn't think anybody is close to Tesla when it comes to solving for autonomy. I for some while have believed this, and I've always been baffled when I hear people like Gary Black, who I have a lot of respect for, say that, well, once autonomy is solved, everybody's gonna basically have it at the same time. I've never seen that to be the case unless, of course, Tesla immediately chooses to license that technology, and I just do not see it playing out like that. So it's really good to hear Elon outright confirm that in his mind, no one else is even close. And I don't want to sound hyperbolic here, but this next thing that Elon said is 100% a game changer. You remember how we came into this video thinking that the chances of Tesla getting into mining were maybe 10, 15%? That number has changed for sure.
Well, the scaling constraints change as time goes by. In the beginning, we were just very vertically integrated because the suppliers didn't take us seriously. Like we could get hardly any of the best suppliers wouldn't talk to us because a car startup has not been successful in the United States since Chrysler in the 20s, I believe they started. So it's been a century since a car company was successful in the U.S. that was not a foreign car company coming in that was already successful in their home market. So, but for an American car startup, it was Tesla's first success in 100 years. So you can imagine if you're an auto supplier, that doesn't sound like a smart financial decision.
Exactly.
So then we had to just build a lot of the stuff ourselves, be vertically integrated, or we couldn't create the car. And then that ended up being an asset because now we understood so much about the entire supply chain and what it took to build a car. So we were able to design a more integrated vehicle that actually needed far fewer parts and costs less and weighs less and has higher performance. But it is looking increasingly like for some of the critical elements of batteries that Tesla will need to get into the mining business, mining and refining.
That's why Glencore was announced. That's why we were talking to Glencore. We were.
No, and we've never contemplated investing in Glencore. I'm talking about Tesla doing it
Ourselves.
Yes.
So Elon's saying it seems increasingly likely that Tesla will get into the mining business directly, when just a few months ago, Elon said that they don't really want to do that, but if they have to, they will. Well, it seems like over that few month period, things have changed and it's now a higher likelihood. We already know Tesla is executing on the refining plans with that lithium refinery in Texas, set to be under construction here in the next few months. It's not a done deal, but just very high level. Of course, this would be big capex, big expenditures on the front end to establish these mining operations, but of course, in the long term, to have that secure, reliable supply, cutting out middlemen will ultimately improve the margins, but there will be fairly high costs to entry. But for a company with aspirations to scale battery production to terawatt hour levels per year, ultimately these expenses would be a drop in the bucket, as wild as that sounds. Much of the rest of the conversation was about SpaceX and Twitter. There was some interesting points about Twitter that I will put at the end of this video. Alright, so you may have seen this picture. IDRA is making the next 9,000 ton Gigapress. It's not confirmed this is for Tesla, but it's likely. One, having the right alloy to actually do the injection molding for this may require a bit of special sauce, which possibly only Tesla has right now. And two, all of the other automakers or customers of IDRA may not be ready for a 9,000 ton Gigapress, especially since the first one hasn't even really been used yet. Those two things would lead me to believe that this is for Tesla, but again, not for sure. So I tweeted this out earlier today. Tony Seba gave us part 3 of his Great Transformation series, and I just wanted to highlight why I think it's important we pay attention to him. 10 years ago, he predicted that solar would become the cheapest source of energy and it would decrease in cost 80 to 90%. Fast forward to today, that's exactly what happened, and this was in the face of everybody at the time telling him it was not going to happen. Point being, he is someone worth listening to. Just want to show you a few quick clips, full video linked below.
So the cheapest sources of energy are becoming 70% cheaper. What do you think is going to happen? This is going to change everything. There is no reason to use anything else, right? Disruption is inevitable. One of the things that the mainstream has pushed back on, and many experts have pushed back on, is the idea that you cannot have 100% solar, wind, and batteries, right? It's a moving target, by the way. First they said you can't have more than 5% penetration, then 15%, then 30%, then 50%. I mean, that story keeps changing, right? But now they say you cannot have 100%, right? So we did the numbers for the whole system, right? We took real world, hourly wind and solar demand generation data. We started with New England as a system, and Texas as a system, and California as a system. And we ran the numbers, and the answer is yes, you can have energy systems that are totally 100% solar, wind, and batteries. Not only can you have that system is the cheapest possible energy generation system on the planet, period. Nothing else comes close.
Here we have a somewhat confusing article coming from the Detroit Bureau. They don't really seem to have any strong sources, so let's proceed cautiously with this one. But they're talking about how they're hearing that Tesla is again working on this new cheap $25,000 Tesla. I'll just preface this by saying we know Tesla is of course working on the Generation 3 platform, that maybe a vehicle like this or the robotaxi or both will ultimately be built upon. They say various company sources and industry observers provided some hints about what may be in the works. Here we get into some speculation of what the body could look like. Will it be a sedan? Will it be a hatchback? Will it be a crossover? We know that Elon has mentioned a hatchback in the past, but maybe that would just be for the European market where it's a bit more popular. But just wanted to touch quickly on this one because I think some people were getting carried away seeing this headline as if this was something new, but it sounds like it's just speculation about this next Generation 3 platform. Let's have a quick listen to Ron Barron in a recent interview talking about Tesla stock, because again, he's been one of the few that have been well ahead of the curve envisioning Tesla's future.
I think I'm going to make 7 times from here in the next 10 years. I make 1.5 or 2 times in the next 3 years. So I think in 2025, I think it'll be 500 or 600. It's now 228. And then I think that by in 10 years, 8 or 10 years, we ought to be somewhere around $4.5 trillion. Elon says now it's a $700 billion market cap. Elon says he thinks it's going to be bigger than Apple and Saudi Aramco together.
You believe that?
Yes. So I think that it's sort of hard to believe, right?
Yeah.
But in 2030, if he does just simple math, if he does 20 million cars a year, there's 100 million cars a year that are being sold right now. If he does 20 million cars a year then, and they're $50,000 a car, that's $1 trillion of revenues. And he has operating profits of somewhere around 30%. That means $300 billion. If you say it's worth 15 times, that's $4.5 trillion. It's now $700 billion. That's how you get those numbers. But that's not including robots. That's not including autonomous vehicles. That's not including batteries. That's not including robots. He thinks robots are going to be bigger than cars. So there's so many things that are happening in Tesla. One remarkable thing is, how do you keep track of this? I can't keep track of as an analyst. You run these companies. How do you do that?
If there's a more exciting company to follow or invest in than Tesla, somebody please let me know. In Germany, Tesla is prepared to foot the bill for customers if they don't receive their Tesla in 2022, as some of these incentives are set to expire at the end of this year. So if they don't get delivery until next year, Tesla will pay that difference for the incentive. Here's a rough translation of this email from Tesla, just saying we will cover the difference for the green bonus in 2022. Just telling customers to order your Model 3 or Model Y before December 31st this year. In terms of how much Tesla may be paying here, there wasn't anything mentioned in the article, but doing a little digging, and any Germans out there correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like this is around a 4,000 euro incentive for non-hybrid electric cars, aka Teslas, up to 60,000 euros. But the federal government and the auto industry are basically splitting these costs, so Tesla would essentially be paying half of that 4,000 euro amount. So the question becomes, will Tesla now be paying an additional 2,000 euros? So they'd be covering the entire 4,000, taking the federal government's half. That would make sense to me, but again, please correct me if I'm wrong on this. A lot of times when German articles get translated, things are lost in translation. The Cybertruck guys shared a picture of the back seat of the Cybertruck, which again, we don't see very often. So honestly, not a ton to see. Of course, it looks like this front seat will fold down and provide an armrest and some extra storage. The back seats do seem to have some side bolsters, which is nice. The panel roof, always good to see. Other than that though, not a whole lot to really take from this image. It looks like BMW is trying to copy the Tesla model. BMW trying to allow customers to have no need to involve a car dealer. We want to give customers the opportunity to order directly from us. This would be for the mini model from 2024 and for BMW from 2026. BMW in constructive talks with its network of dealers. Arrival has been warned about being delisted from the NASDAQ, so now it needs to maintain a $1 or higher share price for at least 10 days, or it risks being delisted. If you've been following Arrival for any time though, this may not be a surprise, as they've had a fair share of challenges. You know, it's almost as if building EVs is a lot harder than most people expected. Who would have thought? Here we have Subaru saying they will not build a United States manufacturing plant for EVs. They're not worried about the Inflation Reduction Act, and the reason they can't compete with the wages at McDonald's, where they're between $20 and $25 per hour. Thus, Subaru not thinking of new investments to build EVs in the US anytime soon. Not to fear though, because Subaru said they will have a dedicated in-house EV assembly plant in Japan in 2027. I won't dive into this one because sadly it's not an electric vehicle, but I love the idea from Ford to basically deliver from the factory this transit trail van for camping specifically. Full article will be linked below. I just wanted to touch briefly on this before going into the weekend. We talked about it yesterday. This chart is the total market value of US stocks divided by the Fed's M2 money supply. What this is showing is that if you basically hold the money supply flat, meaning you remove the impact of the Federal Reserve creating money out of thin air and injecting it into the economy, this is what the stock market would look like over time. And what do you see? Well, the trend is a lot more sideways than a clear bullish upward trend like you've been told your whole life. The stock market always goes up over time. Now, some people said, does this mean that people aren't actually getting wealthy? No, that's not the case. This is just showing the reason or why the stock market always goes up with time. A big driver of the stock market growth over time has been the increase in the M2 money supply. So yes, the stock market does still generally trend up with time, but the reason that happens is actually maybe more driven by the M2 money supply than these companies actually becoming more efficient and generating more economic output. Thus, if we look at the opposite of an increasing M2 money supply, that would be quantitative tightening, which is what we are experiencing right now. So not only are we not holding the money supply steady, we're actually removing liquidity from the system. So we should expect what? The stock market to have a downward bias, especially if one of the main reasons the stock market trends up with time is because the M2 money supply has grown over time. Again, the Federal Reserve creating money, injecting that liquidity into the system, more money chasing fewer assets. Of course, asset prices will rise. But don't want to give too much away. Stay tuned for future projects. Last up today, as promised, I'll share what Elon said about changes coming to Twitter. If you're on the platform, I think they're exciting. He did say he's now working around 120 hours per week, up from around 80, and it's just going to be that way for some time. But the good news, eventually, once Twitter is on a better path, it'll be much easier to manage than Tesla or SpaceX. Hope you all have a wonderful and a safe weekend. Please like the video if you did, and a huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters.
And I think that there is an answer to that, which is to get as many regular users of Twitter to be a subscriber for $8 a month. And you'll get a lot more than just the blue check mark for $8 a month, because now we can afford long form video, long audio, podcasts, and we can also start sharing revenue with content creators, which is essential.
Give them a chance to make money.
Yeah, absolutely. Just so, I mean, right now, if you're on Twitter, you'll see a lot of links posted to YouTube and TikTok, and that's because, at least until now, Twitter has not even given them enough video length to post their video, and then they give the content creators no means of monetizing the video. So we're going to change that rapidly at Twitter. It's going to be transformative. But if we can get enough verified users, and we're going to prioritize Twitter search, replies, mentions by verified users first, yeah, this is very.
And that's what calls amplified.
Yes. If you're payment verified with blue checkmark, then you're prioritized. And so this is the point of this is to make crime not to pay, because right now to create a bot on Twitter costs less than a penny. So the cost of crime is so cheap, and that's part of why crime and hateful conduct pays. But if somebody risks losing even $8, it's too expensive to now have 100,000 fake accounts, because they have to spend $800,000 a month, as opposed to $800 a month. So, and then we also, since we're using payment authentication, we're piggybacking on the authentication system of the payment system, and we're also piggybacking off of Apple's authentication system, which is another layer of security. So the net effect will be, over time, that the verified users will pretty much always be at the top of comments and search, and you won't really see, you'll have to scroll far to see the unverified users, which will be the bots and trolls and whatnot.